Now they're off. Look at them go. This is an exciting race, folks. Who knows who is going to take the Enterprise 2.0 challenge? And it's IT Resistance off to an early lead, neck and neck with management. But wait, it's Lack of Vision stuck at the gate. And now users are scrambling to take the lead. Holy cow, look at that. It's budget and ROI coming up the rear. Look at them run. The pace is increasing. Coming down to the final stretch, it's IT Resistance, Management Resistance, ROI, and users scrambling for the win. Oh my gosh, the race is a blur. We will have to go to the judges to find out who has won this race.
Oh my God, we have to go to the judges. Good afternoon, everyone. We're your judges. I'm Carl Frappaolo.
And I'm Dan Keldsen.
Thank you. We're very, very excited to be here today to talk about the research that we had the privilege to do with the Enterprise 2.0 Council. Watching thoroughbreds race is nothing short of fascinating. And I think that's because when you look at a thoroughbred, you quickly realize what beautiful specimens they are. They are lean, they are strong, they are swift. And when paired up with the right jockey, they seem to have an intuitive sense of strategy, of what it takes to run a race and go for the win. And today, that's what we're going to focus on, the thoroughbreds of the Enterprise 2.0 community. They don't look like this. They come in many different sizes, and Dan's going to explain who we're focusing on.
So clearly, we didn't all come to San Francisco to talk about horses, literally. We're talking about the thoroughbreds of Enterprise 2.0. So these are some of the companies that we have surveyed in doing the work that we're presenting today. Obviously, a lot of these are pretty well-known organizations, some commercial, some not. And this is only a sampling of the full set of people and organizations that took the survey that we launched recently. And there's a couple common characteristics for the participants in this research work. Almost without exception, all of them have over 10,000 employees, so these are not mom-and-pop shops. There's been a lot of talk. I've been covering wikis since 2002. It was a lot different world, much lonelier world, frankly. I'm very happy that we have more people at these shows than the original days when I did this. So these companies are large, and it's a good sign of maturity. They're not just thinking about doing this. They are actually beyond pilots. Almost nobody has done full enterprise-wide deployment of Enterprise 2.0. And if that depresses people, it shouldn't, because I've been covering enterprise stuff, enterprise content management, enterprise search, things like this, for 15 years, and there's almost nothing that's fully enterprise-wide. Even email and manufacturing environments, there are plenty of people on the shop floor who do not have access to email, and you wonder why there's bad communication inside the automotive industry, for example. So there are also, senior management is actually actively engaged. I'm a big believer in emergence and bottom-up engagement with users, but if you do not have sponsors, it's going to be a very hard road to hoe, and all of these companies have senior management engaged. They also do have thousands of engaged users. It's not just a handful of people who think this is a great idea and are trying to run with it, but they actually have large-scale adoption. Hasn't necessarily been easy, and we'll get into that in a second, but it is growing every day. They also command, as you might expect, in the very early days of the wiki world, for example, it was all open source and largely free. As it turns out, free is not free if you follow commercial open source. And if you're talking of, a lot of these organizations have hundreds of thousands of employees, even if it costs a single dollar to get a license for any of the solutions that would cover the Enterprise 2.0 space, that adds up. If you have 300,000 employees, you're talking at least $300,000. So pretty rapidly, I don't know of any software that literally costs $1 a seat, it gets into large numbers. This budget is based on actual spend. About 60% of the response was, in the budget questions that we asked, were the money that they have actually spent versus planned, and there's still more left over that they are working through how they're going to spend that money. And really great news is that it does, the people in the thoroughbreds that we've been analyzing do have multidisciplinary teams, so not just the top-down support, which is very important, not just the bottom-up emergent behavior of users and them being engaged and finding useful ways to do this, but multidisciplinary teams that are actively making this happen.
So, what do these thoroughbreds all have in common? They are all part of a group that you've heard a lot about this week, the 2.0 Adoption Council. And I thought it might be a nice time now in the conference if you could join me in thanking them and their leader, the thought leader behind this whole thing, Susan Skrupski, who had the idea to corral these thoroughbreds together to make them a wonderful, wonderful resource to our marketplace. So why don't you join me in thanking all of them? Oh, come on. There are 115 members on the council so far. We got 77 of them to take time out of their day to share with us real-world experiences of what is going on. Dan just shared with you how real their experiences are. These are million-dollar budgets in very large organizations that are up to here in Enterprise 2.0. We asked them over 20 questions. We've got data that ranges on everything from what were the primary goals and objectives for your project, to who are the members of the team that are driving this, to what were the obstacles that you were up against. And it was the obstacles that we thought we would share with you today, because we have 20 minutes to share so much data. We're not going to cover it all while we're on this stage today. But one very key finding is that adoption of Enterprise 2.0 does not come easy. This is one of the clear differentiations, I think, between it and its counterpart in the commercial world, Web 2.0. We're always hearing about viral adoption. It's not so viral inside. Resistance occurs in many different levels. Now, you've been here probably for at least 1 day, some of you 2, 3 days. And I'm wondering, as you were listening to the case studies, how much you've picked up on this. So we're going to run a quick little survey with you. We want to bring this up. Resistance was real. They all reported different types of resistance. How many of you would say that their strongest force of resistance came from management? Raise your hand. Senior business management. Okay. How many of you would say it was the IT department who pushed back on them? Interesting. And how many of you would say it was the user community who pushed back on them? Well, it looks like in this crowd today, IT is the big winner. So let's find out if you folks know what you're talking about. Dan, let's go live to the thoroughbred stables of Enterprise 2.0 and ask them. No. It actually turned out somewhat surprising, even to Dan and I, and we've been involved in this industry for many, many years, that while the resistance existed on many different levels, the strongest form of resistance came from users. But that wasn't the biggest surprise. So Dan, why don't you explain what I'm talking about?
So this was a short survey that we did, but very powerful. We wanted to get to the core of the messages that we're trying to uncover for what does real success mean and where do people run into resistance. And keep in mind that all the people that are on the council, this is their job, and it's a serious job that they have. So when you voted, of the responses that we got, 49% of people that took the survey, of the 77, thoroughbred E2O players, experienced an issue with IT. Now that could be the IT department itself or technology. This is a sort of high-level view. Versus management, you can see 64% experienced it. So that's curious, and actually the way that that's shaped out with this audience is curious how it flipped around a little bit. And lastly, I don't know about you, but that number sort of surprises me. I think a lot of us in this room are very early adopters. And I tell people I don't know why this happened. I have 6 iPods and iPhones in my house. I don't know how that happened. And nobody gave them to me. Actually, one was a gift, but the rest of them I bought on purpose. I don't know how that happens. So not everybody's like all of us. It has been fun for me. Been to every one of the E2O conferences, and before it was even rebranded from Collaborative Technologies Conference to E2O, that the energy has been growing, the maturity has been growing all along since the beginning of the coining of this term, and that's been a very healthy thing. So slightly concerning that so many people experience these problems, but could they overcome them? And IT resistance was not so bad. They could actually overcome it with a slight variation. So that's great news. The technology itself has gotten pretty sophisticated. And one of the reasons that my fellow analysts used to laugh at me when I was talking about wikis in 2002, because the usability of the early wikis was not fun even for me, and I'm a geek. So that has changed, and thank God for that. As far as management, how many have overcome that? So 64% experienced, 40% overcame it. So there's a widening gap here, if you notice. And lastly, we've heard so much that users are where we aim to get our energy. We're trying to serve them. That's a massive gap there. 72% versus 32%. Wow, that's a 40% delta. And so what does that mean? What does that? Should we all just give up and go home? No. All the people that took the survey, that participated in this research, they do it because they believe in it, and they are getting success out of this. So this shouldn't be causing us to feel negative about this. It's just, let's face the reality that it is work to make this happen. And just like it has been with any enterprise system, it doesn't just, you drop it in and magically everything happens. So we need to do serious work. And I think it's worth keeping in mind, taking a look at this data. Where do you sit in your own organization, and what resistance have you run into as well? So if we look a little more deeply into this, so user resistance, that's a repeat from the previous slide, just to show it in context. We have training requirements, 50% experience, and 37% overcame them. So a little bit of a gap there. Not surprising, most organizations don't do training. And even though Enterprise 2.0 technology tends to be easier to use than if you've ever had the dubious pleasure of using ERP systems, these are typically far easier to use in Enterprise 2.0 than the big, massive enterprise systems that we all, unfortunately, have to use. And community support, this is a major finding, and this came out in many conversations for the first time, and I've been to every one of these for 4 years, really came out as a strong voice in this particular conference, that it's a major concern, and you really do have to dedicate energy and time and resources to make it happen and put in place community managers. If we look into the management issues, so again, a repeat, management resistance was the initial cut, 64 to 40%, so a little bit of a disconnect there. Where does that happen? Even though I'm not an accountant, I'm actually a musician. I went to Berklee College of Music, and I have no business being on the stage, except that I used to be on the stage all the time anyhow, and I'm a geek, whether it's music or literary or technology. But if you cannot measure ROI, then that's a major problem, because especially in this last year, the economy has not been the most healthy economy in the world, so it's a great thing that we started a company in this last year. If you cannot justify your spend, then what are you justifying on it? The good news is, again, the members that took this survey, it's not that they have failed. It's that they have run into some serious roadblocks that we just need to acknowledge and not sweep under the rug. As if people remember the Picardo, I think, cartoon that said, you just don't get it if you're asking about ROI. I think that's a mistake. And lastly, this is a real concern, and this is why we have conferences like this. This is a lot of the work that we do. Let's talk about what is the vision for what this can do. And it's not that we can just get a social network for our employees, that we can get Facebook for our employees, that we can create, that we can use wikis for something. It's what is the business result that we're aiming for, and how can these tools and these systems support us? So a big disconnect. I think collectively we can do a lot to change that. And lastly, if we dive into the IT issues, we put this last because it's among the easiest to overcome. Maturity has happened largely in the technology. We're still getting there. Nothing's perfect. IT resistance, relatively easy to overcome. Immaturity of technology, this has radically changed versus when I first started paying attention to wikis and blogs and everything else that has now more or less become a suite or a platform. If people throw up the red flag that say it's not mature, well, the original wiki was created in 1995. It's been 14 years. It's fairly mature. Databases haven't been around all that much longer than that. So let's get over that. There's some easy wins that we can have here and chop the legs out of those arguments. The immaturity of technology itself, I don't think, is a major concern that you can't overcome necessarily. It's just something you have to be aware of. In technology integration, I know a lot of people who are the real gung-ho Enterprise 2.0 people who think that everything that happened before needs to get blown up and tossed away. And for companies that are the large companies that took these surveys, they're not going to just wipe away that they spent millions of dollars in the past putting in systems that actually had a purpose and probably still have purposes. People still use mainframes because they have a purpose. So the integration into the previous world to make Enterprise 2.0 do what it needs to do, like security, is incredibly important. Now, this is interesting. Have people read the Long Tail book, Chris Anderson? Familiar with it? so it gets a lot of play in Web 2.0. This isn't exactly a power law. I'm covering power law stuff. Again, I don't know why I know these things. I happen to do a lot of research. There's a lot of findings that we had in this, but the top two items that you notice there is that software and staffing, this is many million-dollar budgets that we're talking about. Some of the respondents have budgets that are over $20 million and hundreds of thousands of employees. Top two, 21%, 19%, so 40% of the budget is taken up in, what do you know, the typical areas that all software has. The cost of the software, the cost to install it and run it and operationalize it. To just cherry pick some of the items, because it's impossible to show you all the data on one slide. Number 8, ongoing community management. Only 5% of the budget is spent on community management. And if that's where we're experiencing problems, it might make sense for us to plan ahead. If you have not spent your budget, if you have not planned your budget, make sure that when you're looking at this, that you plan for more money and more time, at least more strategy, if not money, because it doesn't necessarily take money, to make your community actually live and take off and get the adoption that we're talking about. Training, most companies don't do a lot for that, so not surprising that there isn't much money spent there. And internal communications, I know so many people that think that marketing is a scam, that salespeople are the devil, and it has no place in the enterprise. And if you're not doing internal marketing and communications, and you're not selling the benefit of what this can do for you, then it is not going to get taken up. And it is work that you just have to live with and deal with. And as far as the budgets themselves, so if you add it up, it's about 57% of the budgets are $500,000 or more, and as I said, a fair number of this is actually, I think it's about 7%, I could talk to you about the data after this, have budgets that are over $20 million. There's a good clump of people that have budgets that are over $10 million. So there's a lot of money being spent on this, and they are actually succeeding, and that's a great sign. This is for the first time in the entire time that I've been covering this space that we have seen real investments and success, and it is actually growing for the first time in many years that I've seen.
So we have to start to wrap this up. We're beginning to run out of time. We pushed a lot of data at you, but truth be told, there's a heck of a lot more data that's going to be published in the report next week. We could also talk offline about it or during the on-conference. We chose to focus in on the fact that resistance is a reality, because I think that's something we all have to admit to ourselves, that this takes work. This is a radical change in organizations. It takes real work. It's not smooth road ahead, but don't want to have anyone leave here with the wrong impression, right? So the big lessons learned, Enterprise 2.0 isn't free. These budgets are very real. Getting the technology up and running, that doesn't seem to be the big problem, but driving adoption, that's not magic. And it really takes dedicated resources. That's what these thoroughbreds on the council are all about. Senior-level people in their organization that aren't just handling the implementation, but also managing communities and bringing people along. As I said, there's a heck of a lot more data in the report that will be shared that provides a lot more positive spin on all of this. These are people that are succeeding. They're doing very well. One data point that's really very powerful, they were asked, to what degree is your management satisfied with the work done? And I forget the exact, but it's in excess of 80% satisfied to extremely satisfied. So things are working. You know, we heard in earlier keynotes that this is the year where organizations are starting to embrace it, that this is the aha year was the term that was used for Enterprise 2.0. I think these council members are showing us that isn't just marketing hype. It's for real. It's happening in their companies, and what basically they're telling us is, for those of you who aren't in it, Dan, go forward, not backwards. Stop horsing around. This isn't child's play. It's for real. Real benefits exist. That's another big part in this report, where they are getting benefits. You know, we did point out that some of them, quite a few of them, had trouble with the ROI. That doesn't mean that they're not seeing benefits. The benefits are very real, very major. They just don't lend themselves very nicely into a financial spreadsheet. More on that as well. So with that, there's two ways we would like for you to get more involved with this council and more involved with this data. One of them is to download the report. The report will be free. The report is available to everyone out there for download. And the reason we can do that is because of the generosity of OpenText, who stepped up to the plate and underwrote this research report. And for those of you who were thinking, oh my God, well then it's going to be slighted towards them, yeah, no, because none of the questions we asked had anything to do with products or technology per se. It was more the experience of what's going on. So no one vendor is even talked about in this report. So I would like to thank OpenText very, very much for making it available to the marketplace at no charge. I think they agree with us that, the more widespread this kind of good information is, the more quickly and healthy this market can grow. The next thing you can do is, with the help of Crowdcast, now we are launching the first adoption index prediction market. Participate in this. Let your voice be heard. Get involved. It's a lot of fun. There's the URL to get included into this prediction market. Make sure you get involved. The last way you can get involved is stay in touch with Dan and I. As I said, we'd be happy to talk with you offline here at the show during the on-conference. There's contact information for us. We obviously like to talk about this. And last, I just want to say, remember, this Enterprise 2.0 Council is really hearing from the horse's mouth. Don't underestimate the value of the lessons learned that they are sharing with us. Because if you're not talking to the horse's mouth, what are you talking to? Thank you.
Thanks.